Welcome once more, you lucky people, to the Magic Morning Wood with
Yes.
Tim over there. What's your name?
Me. I'm Ron. Yeah,
Hey,
and
Ron.
him over. No,
Oh,
there.
me? Uh, yes, I'm Timothée.
Timothée Chalamet.
No, not that one. You don't like him. You would do a podcast with him.
I don't dislike Timothée Chalamet. I just don't like
Timothée. Timothée Chalamet. Timothée Chalamet.
Timothée.
Hey, Ron. How's it going?
Over here we have Tony Blair.
Tony Blair. Yeah, that's copyright my wife.
Yeah.
Who's obviously as hilarious as I am.
Was it Tony Blair she was using?
Tony Blair, yeah.
Oh, that was Tony Blair. I thought it was Tony something else. Okay.
No, she also Samuel Jackson.
Yeah.
We got loads of them.
Samuel Jackson.
We got loads of them.
Yeah. So, what are we doing here, Clive? Why are we here?
Fuck knows. Oh yeah, we're talking films. That's right. And
Right.
yes, we're reacting to the last film, which was
The Long Good Friday, right?
The Long Good Friday. Yes. So
I remember.
well done. I
Thanks.
actually forgot temporarily that. Yeah, Long Good Friday. So we're both reacting to Long Good Friday. I shall go first, and I went via director John Mackenzie, and I chose UNMAN, Wittering and ZIGO from 1971, a British film directed by John Mackenzie, based on I think what started life as a radio play.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, Giles Cooper. In fact, I listened to one version of the radio play.
Oh, really?
Watching the film, yeah, which is quite interesting. It was actually, I can see why this was kind of something that lingered in people's memories. It's the play has some kind of differences to the film, which I might get to, but yeah, it was quite well regarded radio play in this day, and I think it was also, I think they also did it on stage. And did you listen to the commentary track by any?
I didn't. No.
Okay, so I listened to the commentary by Kim Newman and Sean Hogan, I think. I listen to any commentary Kim Newman does because he's one of my favorites. But yeah, he was explaining how actually he read it in school as well. He read the play in school, like it was on the syllabus. And yeah, I get the feeling that this the generation prior to mine, I think this was UNMAN, Wittering and ZIGO was quite the cult film that would have turned up on television quite a lot back maybe from the mid-70s through to the early 80s. But then I think when I was starting to grow up, I think it might have kind of slipped out of vogue a little bit. So this was not a film I had seen. Had you seen this film before, by any chance?
No.
I hadn't seen this film before, but I've known about it for a long time because it does have this cult reputation. But the cult was a little bit before my time, and yeah, I'm pretty sure it wasn't, because I would have watched anything with a title like this if it had turned up, because I would have gone, "What the fuck is that?" And I would have, just checked it out for that reason alone, right? So I think it's a cult for the generation just previous to us. It's UNMAN, Wittering and ZIGO, the movie, the play would have been a known enough entity for. So, for example, this is something I never put two and two together before until I was listening to the commentary track. Actually, was Rowan Atkinson. So Rowan Atkinson. I don't know if you're familiar with the Secret Policeman's Ball. Secret Policeman's Ball were these kind of pre-comic relief, like kind of comedy stage shows that they would put on, I think, late 70s, early 80s, and some of them ended up filmed and shown on television and on video and stuff. And there were a lot of famous people who would turn up, like the Pythons, and Rowan Atkinson was then in this group called the Not the 9 O'Clock News, which you're probably not that familiar with. I don't think that traveled much outside the UK. It's kind of and a lot of those people went on to become famous, including that's where Rowan Atkinson became famous before he did Blackadder, and then before he stopped being funny and doing Mr. Bean and Johnny English and shit like that, right? But Rowan Atkinson, one of his routines, which people may be familiar with, they might have seen it on YouTube or something, because it's often clipped from, he did this thing where he stands up, he's like a school master doing the register at the beginning, and all students have like funny names, you know, like, you know, it's not, but it's like a bunghole or something like that, you know, and he does it in that inimitable Rowan Atkinson voice, right? So it's quite a funny bit. But
right.
what I never realized was it's a direct parody of
This movie.
the names of UNMAN Wittering, because all the kids have bizarre names, right?
Yeah, bizarre names. Yeah.
And I never know.
Actually, I was going to ask you about that. Because they were quite bizarre, but I was wondering if they were more common in the UK names.
No, I think they're all deliberately kind of out there, but they're also kind of within the realms of, because for instance, there's a few other characters that there's like one of the teachers is Winstanley, right? And that's like a famous kind of historical name, and that, so yeah, it's that kind of blending of just on the edge of ridiculous.
Because I wouldn't think like Wittering doesn't sound that strange.
Yeah.
It sounds like a lot of them sound like they could be, but I was like, yeah. So,
but that's the kind of cleverness of it, I think, is that it rises out. But just to point out that this was obviously, because obviously if you make reference to something and no one gets the reference, it's not funny, right? So UNMAN Wittering is like
parody.
Must have been enough in the published cognition, probably because the film was repeated on TV, that Rowan Atkinson could make reference to it. So so just anyway, so script by Simon Raven, who's also a character in his own, most famous now for writing a book called Dr. Weir's Scarlet that was turned into a very weird horror movie around about the same time as this, actually, called Incense for the Damned, which is a very, very weird vampire movie, and of course starring David Hemmings. David Hemmings, again, another very interesting character, started life as kind of like a pop star, I guess, before he was anything else. And then
was he? Okay.
And then he's in Antonioni's Blow Up, of course, which got him, make him a mega star. And then he went off to Australia at some point and directed some films, produced films. He's one half of Hemdale. The Hem in Hemdale is Hemmings. Someone Dale is the other half. Hemdale, a production company, short-lived, but most famous for bringing the world to Terminator.
Okay. Oh, Terminator. Okay.
Yeah. So David Hemmings, fascinating kind of career in his own right, in Argento's Deep Red, and it's very interesting to see him in this, because the more I see David Hemmings, the more I kind of realize why people kind of rate him, because he's quite a weird on-screen presence in this. Like he's something quite vulnerable about him, but he's got a kind of, I don't know, he's odd-looking fella. So anyway, he's the star, and he's the new teacher at a very small kind of minor public school, right, called Chantry House, and he's come there with his wife in tow, as played by Carolyn Seymour, and he's to be in charge of class 5B, because his predecessor, the teacher before, seems to have fallen off a cliff. Right. Which
not just seems, we actually see him from his point of view fall off the cliff at the very beginning of the movie, right?
Yes, exactly. By the way, this was all shot in Llandudno in Wales as well. Those beautiful locations.
Oh, really?
Yes, Llandudno. So he's been tasked with taking over this class 5B, and pretty quickly the class kind of admit to him rather casually, while they're winding him up on his first day of school, that we killed that teacher.
Well, it wasn't casually, it was more like he tries to give them detention on Saturday.
Yes.
And they're like, oh, you shouldn't do that. And he's like, well, why not? He goes, oh, because their last teacher did that and we killed him for it, right? So it was like, it's meant to be threatening. It wasn't really casual Yeah. So yeah, but
what I mean is that it's kind of, they're not really making any, they've got him round their little finger kind of from the beginning, really.
Yeah, sure.
So it becomes this kind of battle of wits, and no one really kind of believes him, and they decide to, as a modus vivendi, right, a way of life, right? We won't give you any grief or trouble. You pretend to be our teacher and give us good marks, and we'll behave. Oh, and by the way, you also put on bets for us because they're going to make money from some kind of horse racing scheme.
Horse racing, yeah. So yeah.
And of course, things escalate, and the wife so they're staying in a cottage, right, which is very near on the grounds of the school. The difference is actually from the original radio. In the radio play, they're not staying at a cottage nearby, so they amp that up a little bit, right? So because it's all within this, you don't really step outside this world much, right? Apart from going to the local pub or whatever.
Right.
Yes, and and things escalate as you may expect. I don't know if we want to go into any more about the plot, really, other than these are some horrible kids.
Yeah.
I was wondering if this film might have been a little bit of a influence on a Class of 1984, if you ever watched that.
Oh yeah, I can't remember that one, but
Although,
the name sounds familiar. But
Class of 1984 goes further, right? Like the quite scary scene where basically the wife is threatened with gang rape, right? In a
right.
That quite scary scene. Yeah, well, let's just say in Class of 1984 that goes all the way.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a bit more of a revenge film. This doesn't really necessarily go that route that you expect, right? Yeah, so what did you make of UNMAN, WITTERING, and ZIGO then, Ron?
Well, how about you? What did you make of it? It was your first time too, right?
Okay, yeah, no, it was my. I'll go first then. Yeah, no, I really liked it. I definitely understand why it does have the cult following. It is and because it's not that big budget a film, but they had Jeff Unsworth as the DP on it, right? And I think that makes a big difference because it looks really, really good. And like you were saying from the beginning, there's some interesting stuff with the camera actually falling off the cliff.
Yeah, falling. Yeah, so yeah, I was wondering how they did that in the early 70s.
Something to do
how
with
you could do that with
some kind of styrofoam ball or something, apparently.
Oh, really? Yeah. How you do it without, because it was falling down a cliff into the water, right? So how you would do that without ruining the camera. So like, I was curious about that. So.
It's quite impressive. But it's a good, I think it's one of the good examples of, when you do something from stage or radio for screen, they either go too far and like, we will have a scene on the moon, like for no reason at all, or it looks really stagey, right? I think this does just the right, it opens up, but
I thought it was quite effective, actually. Good way of opening it.
Yeah, but not too much, right? So it still remains kind of claustrophobic, and
right, yeah, sure.
There's like scenes like because where with I don't know, spoilers just in case. Then spoiler.
I think we spoil everything. Why stop now?
This is true. Yeah. Okay. Spoiler it. So So Wittering, the character of Wittering is kind of ends up being quite important as well. The kind of a sort of reveal. No, I thought this was a really, really, really excellent film. Actually, very well crafted. Ratcheted up the tension really well. Obviously has great performances, and you got Douglas Wilmer as the headmaster. Tony Haygarth I liked as the art teacher guy. Who I listened to the radio version. I didn't have a chance to look up who it is, but whoever plays that character in the radio version is brilliant because they have this quite a weird, unusual high voice. So that character speaks like this. I don't know if it's his natural voice if he did it, but it's quite effective and amusing, and brings a new kind of element. I think there are a few differences between I think that character might be one of the ones that suffers a little bit in the transition to the screen, because in the radio play that character has a lot more agency than in the film. But I only know that just because I listened to it afterwards. You know, if I watching
Right.
it, I didn't think it was lacking, right?
Mm.
So yeah, it was really good. I suppose when it gets to the reveal at the end, maybe that's where I didn't feel it let down a little bit, because I understand what they were going for. There's a little bit of a, so early on the headmaster's showing him around. He says something about authority is born of obedience, right? Is like the motto of the school. And
Sure. Yeah.
and it is one of the these kind of very kind of minor public school places which you'd expect this sort of institutional kind of bullying and stuff from, and a very kind of it's the kind of schooling that was invented to prop up empire, right? Basically, it was a school where people were sent to because they were going to sent off to, they were going to be sent off to colonize some part of Africa, and something like that. And they weren't necessarily breeding well-educated people; they were breeding people for authority, right?
Right. Did you go to school like this?
No. I would have gone to. Although some of the trappings, I mean, were familiar, like, because a lot of the schools they were fairly run down after the 70s, so they still had like these old ancient desks, and stuff like that. And so the architecture of it is, some of the schools I would have gone to would have been refurbished, but only half. Like, you still had some kind of things looking like this. And then
You said this was a public school? I thought it was a private.
well, what they call a public school, but yeah, private school, yeah.
Oh, I see. They call public schools private. They call private schools public schools?
Yes.
Okay. What do they call private schools? Public schools?
Well, no, private. You mean, what do we call public schools?
Yeah.
It's the private school called comprehensives.
Comprehensives. Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, why is it called public if it's private? Isn't that the exact opposite of what it actually means?
This is one of the great mysteries that
okay.
generations of Brits have grown up. Why the fuck is this called? Because apparently, like, technically anyone can go, right? As long as you have a knighthood and lots of money in your
and lots of money, right?
Although, of course, there are scholarship cases and all this, but yeah,
right, sure.
Yeah, so obviously I understand there is all of that bound up in this kind of, that's the part of the kind of final message of the film is, who's the real victims of the only thing I would say is it feels it's a little bit of a kind of handbrake turn, like, that we don't just all fucking, or the David Hemmings characters doesn't just fucking hate all these kids who have just tried to gang rape his wife, right? Like, he's a little bit too forgiving, and the film also a little bit, so the ending feels a little abrupt, or in your terminology, unearned, right? That very last bit, but that doesn't spoil the rest of the film for me. I think it was such fun kind of getting there, and so well done, then that kind of gets a bit of a pass from me. How about you? What did you make of
it? I was, as you were talking, I was echoing in my head almost everything you were saying. Yeah, so I really liked it. I was quite taut and really ramped up the tension. It's quite chilling. I really liked the boys in this. They were so, like, they really got exactly the level of nonchalance, but chilling nonchalance that was like perfect.
Yeah.
It was, yes, oh yeah, of course, like this wide-eyed, innocent but talking about evil kind of thing. Like, it was just, it was really, I really thought they all kind of nailed it. And I thought David Hemmings was, he was the, I thought he was mostly good, and most of everything. He hit all the notes right. I thought his character was a little uneven in some places where he would, I mean, being a teacher myself, he starts the movie being like, I'm so excited to be a teacher, and I love to teach, and and I can't wait to be the best teacher ever. And then he walks in and he basically proceeds to, like, immediately be a terrible teacher, right? So, like, it was like, I'm not sure. Again, I'm not sure if it was a cultural and time issue, because maybe British teachers of the 60s and 70s, this was a good teacher. Like, well, you know, people were excited to do this kind of teaching, but like it walks in and immediately it starts to be this sort of like, you know, my impression was that with this, you know, what was the line? The authority breeds obedience, whatever was that?
Authority
That
is
he was going to be,
born of
yeah,
obedience.
yeah. So that he was going to be like the one teacher that was not like that. That he was going to be like the cool teacher, and you know, and which is I think what he really wanted to be. But then he immediately just started doing that same thing, and I was kind of like, oh, I was a little disappointed in that. So I didn't feel like he was really trying that hard to be the enthusiasm for teaching he had at the beginning didn't seem to come through in the action. I mean, this is before they've even revealed that they've killed and started to.
I kind of know what you mean.
Yeah,
to be fair,
yeah.
they don't give him much chance. And to your point as well about it
Sure.
maybe being a cultural and time difference, I think that might be it. I think, yes, I don't think this kind of minor public school would have, you know, a kind of full-on fucking Robin Williams Dead Poet Society would have been shown the door immediately, I think. Like,
sure, yeah. But at the same time, it's sort of like, yeah. But like it was just immediately became just kind of like real stern, like kind of asshole teacher immediately, right? And I was like, oh, okay. So I was a little disappointed that he decided to go that way. But
oh, that's
I mean, I guess
interesting. I kind of thought that because I think that would have been the 1971 public school version of.
Sure, I guess again, yeah. But the way he was talking about teaching, I didn't expect that to happen. So I mean, again, it's neither here nor there. I don't think that's really an important point, but
I think whereas funny though is now because I think maybe they didn't bring this out enough, but the art teacher character does kind of say that at some point. Oh, you're one of those. He says something like you're hunting some kind of idyllic, kind of like you've tried the real world and now you've come to this kind of public school and you think it's going to be all like Billy Bunter and scones on the riverside and stuff like that, right? So I get the feeling that his character is not so, again, this is how I read it, not so much that he really wants to teach. I think he really wants that lifestyle.
Okay.
What I mean, rather than I really want to teach children. I think he's after that kind of upper middle class dream. I get the feeling.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't get because the way he was talking was that it seemed like he was really excited about teaching, right? So I was.
It could be right. Anyway. It could be right. That's
yeah, I don't know. Anyway,
things have changed though. Did you notice enjoying a nice glass of beer?
Yeah, glass of beer during lunch. Yeah. I thought that was right in the cafeteria in front of the kids. Yeah, during Was that like a thing when you're in school? Like the teachers drink beer?
No.
But I know that's like a British thing. You can go to on your lunch break, go to the pub and get a pint, right? Isn't that like a British thing?
Again, that depends on that would depend on the job, and it would depend on the class, right. And it would. I mean, but even in like for instance, in the United States, right? Like I get the feeling that there's certain jobs, like for instance, journalism, or used to at least be a very heavy drink. Like, all right, got all the reporting done for the afternoon edition, and now you go off and get drunk, right, for the rest of the day, right? So, whereas other lines of work that would be a no, right? So
okay,
yeah.
But that you just said that would be after he finished the work or she finished the work. Yeah. But I mean, I understood that there was like some lines of work where in England, even nowadays, or in all of Great Britain, where they would actually have a beer on their lunch break.
I mean, yeah, if it depending on it, but yeah, I think there's probably still some offices where if you went for a long liquid lunch, that would kind of be acceptable. Although it's certainly a dying.
Right. Yeah, it's probably a less thing. Yeah, because I mean, we would never even consider having alcohol during a working day in Canada, right? So, right. But anyway, back to the movie. So, I thought everything was enraptured isn't the right word, but I was quite immersed in the world of the movie the whole time, and I was really involved with what was happening. I wish like the wife's character kind of irritated me because she was really stupid.
Oh, really?
She kept like inviting he kept telling her like these kids are evil, and she's like no, and then she would just keep inviting them in her house and going places with them by herself. Like it was just, I was like, it just
really.
I don't know.
That's interesting because I have a total different read of and again, this is a major difference from in the radio play I listened to. The husband, the main character, is almost already fed up with his wife from the beginning, and
okay.
But they're much more of a couple in this film. I actually, oddly enough, I have almost totally. I really liked her character. I thought her character was really strong because, so for instance, they have no problem giving him shit in the classroom or outside the classroom, whatever. And there's the time, again, spoilers, they go around to the house and they have the knife with them, right? And they're clearly, and I thought that was played beautifully because they are so tongue-tied in front of, a young, attractive
woman, yeah.
Like, and she's like, oh, casually, she's like, oh, sit down, and they like sit down and meet. And I was thinking, wow, she'd be so much better a teacher than her husband. Like, and the only time they, they have any kind of that they can pull authority on her is when they're in a group and she's terrified and is at night and stuff. So I actually thought her character being like casual, like what even trying to having more control over these kids than he did. I thought that was quite. I didn't think she was stupid at all. I just thought she was the one I could relate to. I could relate to her far more than him. Like I don't understand his dream of the school, and it's beyond me. But her, I can kind of get, like, because he's always immediately down the pub, and she's like, "What the fuck are you doing?" Like,
well, I mean, it wasn't perfect. There was a couple things like, and he's so worried about these kids, and he knows that they've come to his house because he's found the shoe and stuff. And so what does he do? He fucks off to the pub and like gets drunk, and like, I was like, you would think that he would be like at home, like making sure that they're not coming into his house. You know what I mean? So just, some stuff like that didn't quite read as completely believable for me. But and then and also the fact that there was like, how many of them were there? There's like 20, at least 20 of them or so, right?
I don't know, less than that, I think. There was just over a dozen, maybe, in the class, it seems. Yeah.
Really, I think it's more than a dozen.
I don't know, because the film doesn't concentrate on them all, right? Some of them you only.
Well, you do see the full cast list at the end where he goes through each of their names, right? There's
I don't think there's 20.
Yeah. Well, anyway, it was a little bit like when she was in that was it a squash court or a handball court?
Squash court, yeah.
Yeah. So that, I mean, I was like, I couldn't understand why they couldn't catch her because there's so many of them that there was such a small space, right? So that I was like, how does she keep getting away from them, right? So, but anyway, I thought it was still well done. I was still quite gripped by it.
It's a good scene of tension, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then yes, I did think now on the title, I thought the title was really kind of odd, as you said. It was kind of stuck out, and so I was interested to see if it was going to go anywhere. And like I was also a little bit confused by, like, for example, ZIGO, which is the last name of the list, and they make a point of saying from the very beginning, oh, he's absent, he's gone to Jamaica because he's not feeling well, or he's gone to recover or something like that, right? So I really expected that to come up again, like something like he has gone because he was sick because of this crime, or because he was like mentally recovering, or they have bullied him and we're moving down the list. They bullied him and now we're moved on to Wittering, or something like that, but they never really came back to it. So I don't know if it was something that was cut or if it was just
I think that's the inference, though, isn't it? Because
I guess
Wittering's next on the list, right? So I think it's just one of those inferences that they don't really need to push.
Need to make. Okay, and then the Wittering, I guess, Wittering. So that the other thing that was like, what, like, kind of made me like, rah, which is that, I mean, he's the teacher he's trying his best to find cracks, right? He takes a couple different situations. He takes boys, and he's trying to corner them and say, like, who did it? Who's the ringleader? Whose decision was it? Stuff like that. And they don't crack, but of course the ones but then there's one other scene, kind of chilling scene, where he's given up and he's in the classroom, and the boys decide to just full on attack Wittering while he's there reading a newspaper and totally ignoring them, right? Kind of thing, right? Yeah. And so he knows that Wittering is being bullied. So why doesn't he try to get Wittering to crack. Do you know what I mean? Like
Well, I
Wittering
think
would have
that's
been the
part of the thing, right? Is that in the end, he's another part of the system because he didn't help Wittering. That's the thing. He did turn a blind eye. He did hide behind his newspaper. Like in a way, he's complicit in the system that creates this, right?
Sure, yeah. I mean, that I get, but if he really wanted to find out who the ringleader was, Wittering would have been the person to go to because he would have had the most highest percentage or highest chance of cracking because he's the one who was obviously being bullied. So I know if I was in his position and I looked at these and who am I going to get to try to crack and to turn on the others, I would go to the guy who's being bullied first because he has the the least to lose by turning on them, right? You know, so.
But I suppose he won't even tell him who jabs him in the class, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, but that's in the class in front of everybody.
I guess.
So anyway, so I was like, I wish he just So, but then of course, you know, so again, spoiler, turns out that Wittering was the one in charge of it, which
takes away the surprise then, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, the surprise. Yeah. So, and that was, I thought, I mean, you said it was not quite a letdown, but it did kind of. Yeah, I was really fully invested, even though I hadn't kind of my kind of frustrated issues with a couple of things through the thing. That was a little bit like I was like, that didn't really read for me. I think that was that.
Yeah, agreed.
I get it that he had it was his idea to try to be accepted.
Yes.
And then so that was an interesting idea, but then still wasn't accepted, and they still continued to like viciously bully him. And
I suppose,
yeah,
in a way, it does. Actually, I believe that as I don't think that I agree with you. The film doesn't sell it, but I think that is believable as one of the things I was thinking
in real life. Sure.
Yeah, there was a Japanese film a few years ago called Confessions as well, and there's a whole kind of subgenre of like Japanese thrillers set in schools where there's motivation by bullying and people going along to get along. And I was thinking, yeah, this is very much a film you can imagine being remade quite easily in Japan.
Sure, yeah. I was thinking this would be a really good a remade, really good thriller if it was remade. I think so.
Which I think they kind of have over the not officially, you know.
Yeah, right. Yeah, sure.
And there are an awful lot of Japanese school set thrillers with this kind of dynamic set
idea, right? Yeah.
Yeah. But no, I know what you're saying. The film doesn't necessarily sell just that last bit.
Yeah, and then the last bit where he basically they've tried to rape his wife, and he's like, "Why would I ever help you?" And then, "Oh, we got to find Wittering." Okay, sure, I'll go help you. And then I guess I wasn't quite sure what happened at the very, very last bit. So he's just kind of gone back to being their teacher. Is that the idea?
I'm not sure about that. I don't think so because he doesn't have the job, right? Well, so that's
that's right.
That's the other unspoken thing, which is kind of because it's interesting that I think this is a film that kind of provokes a lot of conversation, right? Which is kind of what's interesting.
Yeah, I guess good. Yeah.
The thing that's interesting to me as well is the headmaster character, for example, played by Douglas Wilmer, and by extension all the other authority figures. Do you think he knows that the kids killed the teacher, or
I mean,
expects it,
and he just doesn't want to admit it, or he just can't be bothered with it, or maybe he himself didn't really like the teacher and he was like happy to get rid of him. Yeah, I mean those are all possibilities that kind of pass through it. So I like that they didn't answer any of those questions because because he is quite dismissive of it and really doesn't even entertain the idea at all, right? So I thought that's like, well, maybe he does know, and he just doesn't.
Yeah, as long as the rugby team delivers every year, then
sure, yeah.
You know,
or maybe they're doing the same thing to the headmaster that they've done to him,
right?
And they know it, or So it was interesting that they didn't explain that. Yeah, so I thought so too. Yeah, so
it's quite funny in the commentary as well. I was quite pleased. Kim Newman and Sean Hogan talk about because I had to play fucking rugby in school.
Okay.
I hated it, and I think that's the thing. People who didn't grow up playing rugby don't seem to realize that it's one of those, like, because my brother, for instance, loves rugby, right? And he's not bigger than me, but but it's the sort of sport that a few people excel at, right? And everyone else is just trying not to get hurt. Basically. And people
Right.
don't realize that you play rugby in the winter. It's a winter sport that you play in the hard ground. It's either hard frozen ground or mud because it's been raining, right?
Right.
And it's just a horror. If you're not, you know, it's yeah. Anyway. No, so it's definitely a film that's obviously still provokes conversation, right? It's still it's amazing, really, to consider, and the play is even older, right? And it's still something here, right? It's not entirely a world of the past by any means, right?
Yeah, sure. I think it's, and even like, I mean, the idea of bullying and the idea of you know, this kind of you know, I don't know what kind of thriller what subgenre you put in, but this sort of like, but it didn't feel like it was particularly old or that it was irrelevant. It's certainly irrelevant,
Right.
even if not even more so today these days, right? So yeah, so I thought it was a really good. I also thought, I was like, oh, this would be a great reboot or a great remake. Yeah, so someday, but
it's like, I don't know, it's like 95% perfect or something, isn't it? It's just,
well, yeah. So I mean, I had a couple like, oh, if only they had done it this way or changed that a little bit. I was like, if they did like a modern day reboot, I think that they could kind of tweak those screws and be like a really good thriller, I think.
It's interesting. The squash court scene actually might be kind of pivotal as well, because that's nowhere in the radio film.
Okay.
You only get the little visit with the flick knife and the hint that there's none of that squash. And so in a way, I think that might be the problem of the film, because if you remove that, you don't have that weird sudden peak and then it goes back to. But on the other hand, it does make it very cinematic, and
yes,
Mackenzie does an excellent job with that scene, right?
Right, yeah. Because I also thought it. I mean, I'm not surprised to know that it was a stage play, because I was watching this thing and like, oh, this would be a great play too, because it's very few sets and a very kind of you know, closed door. You know, like I can't remember I forget what the type the term is. Where is it, like, you know, one setting or two settings? Very easy to stage on a set, right? So
yeah,
but yeah. It was it was a good watch though. Good choice.
Yeah, no, I'm glad I finally got around to seeing it, and it was fun talking to you about it as well.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it was yeah. Maybe someday.
Okie doke then. So we shall move on from UNMAN, WITTERING and ZIGO. And what was your choice and how did you get there, Ron?
Okay, so my choice was staying in the realm of British films, I guess, famous British films, I guess. This one was called WITHNAIL and I. And the link was a few different links, actually.
Well, I was quite surprised by one of them. You led with Dara O'Malley. Which I thought was quite
here's how I got there. So I didn't know what the link was. When I basically went to IMDb, and they have that kind of like a more like this category, right? Where they link movies for you, right? And then I usually look at that first to see if there's anything that interests me in that case. And I saw WITHNAIL and I there, and I was like, oh, definitely want to do WITHNAIL and I. WITHNAIL and I has been on my like top 10 need to watch movies for like a long time. Like,
so had you not seen it before?
I've never seen it before, but I've been meaning to see it for so long, because it's always on this, you know, everybody's top 10 list of, you know, movies you got to see, and and this one is the most, you know, inspiring movie, and so it's like I'm constantly saying to myself, I need to watch this movie, and I never got into it. So finally I found one that's on the list of more like this or connected to this, but I couldn't figure out what the connection was. I was going through the entire cast. I was like, "Where's the link? Like, what is this link?" And so I finally found one very, very small character named who is played Irishman. He played Irishman in Great Long on Good Friday, and played second Irishman in this one, or the opposite. It was played basically the title of Irishman in both. I was like, okay, finally, there's at least one person I can find that's a link that's in both movies. So I used that one.
I'm calling you a ponce, Ron. I'm calling you a ponce.
And so then I went and watched the trailer and realized that, oh, this is also a handmade film.
Right.
So I was like, oh, okay. So it's also, okay. So then I wrote back and I was like, oh, it's also a handmade film. And then actually, even after that, I found out, oh, this is also produced by George Harrison.
Well, yeah,
which is
handmade films. He's the executive producer. Right? All handmade films, yeah.
I didn't know that, so I didn't.
Okay.
I didn't. Yeah, so I was like, oh, okay. So there's actually a lot of links here. So I didn't realize. So anyway, so that was.
I was thrilled that you chose, because I almost went for this when we did Life of Brian, which is of course the original handmade films. I almost went for this as my reaction, but for me, it's very different. So for me, it would be like difficult to justify it just because I've seen this film about 8,000,004 times, right?
Right. Yeah.
So difficult. So when you chose it, I was like, brilliant. I just get to watch WITHNAIL. I even hardly have to do any research because I've done it all before. I've watched the film. Sure. I've watched all the commentaries. I've watched all the documentaries about it several times. So I'm just going to sit back and enjoy.
And I knew that you probably would know a lot more about this movie than I would. Obviously, being my first time. And so actually, I was kind of hoping to do something a little different today, where even though this is my choice, I was hoping that you would kind of take the lead on this one and kind of introduce us to it, because you have a lot more kind of framework for it.
Well, I mean, Joe, I'll do the plot. I mean, sure. It's not exactly.
Well, I mean, more than the plot. I mean, all the documentaries, all the. Well, why don't you talk about the place in British cinema that this movie?
Oh, I see. You want to do that first, you?
Sure, why not?
Okay, all right. Well, I mean, what could I say? I mean, WITHNAIL and I comes out in '87 and is pretty much a commercial flop, right? Out the gate. Bruce Robinson, the writer director, had started life as an actor. Most famously, his big gig was doing Zeffirelli's Romeo and Juliet. Went over to Italy. Kind of since then has kind of. I don't know if he's ever come fully out in explaining what happened to him exactly, but basically, it seems as if he suffered from abuse at the hands of Zeffirelli or Zeffirelli.
Yeah, that's what I read. Yeah, that apparently that it was, and
and it's like
and that right? There's a reference in this to that, right? So.
Yeah. And so anyway, and then kind of not a failed actor, but and then hit it big because he wrote The Killing Fields, right? He wrote the script for The Killing Fields, and then when he got to direct, he directed this very autobiographical story about his time as a young actor. It's set in Camden in 1969, right? I suppose the character played by Paul McGann is more or less Bruce Robinson, and Richard E. Grant, just fucking what a phenomenal Richard E. Grant this is, right?
And I guess this is Richard E. Grant's first movie too, right?
Yeah, I think so, pretty much. And more than that, the thing that's remarkable is that I still think Richard E. Grant's portrayal of WITHNAIL is still kind of the benchmark of how you play someone who's basically a functioning alcoholic. And he's a teetotaler.
And he's never drunk before.
No, he did apparently for this film. Like Bruce Robinson insisted that he
made him,
yeah, just so he had some kind of memory of what it was like to be drunk. But it's astonishing because he does do that thing about he doesn't play drunk, right? He's a drunk trying to play sober, like when the police stop them. It really is a extremely well observed bit of drunk acting.
But I have to. I mean, as someone who doesn't really drink myself, I'm actually a teetotaler myself. Is that I think that playing, I find it. I didn't think it was that difficult. I was less. I mean, how do I put this? That yes, it was a great performance, but it was less sort of amazing for me because I know that as a teetotaler and as the one sober guy at the party, it's very easy to observe the mannerisms of drunk people and and if you have any sort of acting talent or ability at all, it's sort of easier to kind of see them and imitate those types of mannerisms than it is to just be drunk and remember what you're doing when you're drunk, right? So
Yeah, I understand what you mean, but on the other hand, though, it seems so from the outside looking in, though, right? Like he genuinely seems inebriated, right? It doesn't
sure,
seem
yeah,
like a
yeah, yeah,
performance.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
but
yeah.
again, obviously he's aided by like makeup. There's some
Right.
really great makeup in this film. Watching it this time or something, especially like when when Danny, the drug dealer, takes his shades off, and you actually get to see what his eyes look like, and it's like, whoa, fucking hell, that's a man with a lot of yeah, there's a lot of country miles on those eyes, right?
Right.
But anyway, yeah, yeah, and the real life Vivian something, I forget his family name. So the character that WITHNAIL is based on, Vivian, you can see him in, there's a British film from the 70s called Ghost Story, 1974 or something, and that's the real Vivian, that's the real WITHNAIL in that film, which is actually quite an interesting haunted house film, which is entirely set in rural England, but amazingly was shot in India, and you would never believe it. Like,
Really?
yeah, comes up at the end, shot entirely, and what?
Why?
Yeah,
Why were they shooting?
I can't remember. Something to do with someone had some very, like, because it's set in the past, and someone had built this replica like English stately home in India, and it was the thing that just looked more like anything like that that survived in the UK, and they got it cheap or something, so they went and shot it in India.
All right.
Anyway, so yeah, so yeah, WITHNAIL and I are basically a couple of neurotic kind of out of work actors, very fucked up, living in kind of squalor. Again, very much the Bruce Robinson story at that time, from what I believe. And so it would have been before he got the Zeffirelli gig, I guess.
Right. Yeah.
Because that's kind of what
Yeah, I
happened.
assumed like the part that he gets at the end probably was referring to the
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
Zeffirelli, yeah.
yeah. It's very autobiographical. And yeah, so they're kind of at the end of their tether, and there's a lot about stuff, you know, it's the fag end of the 60s and stuff like that, and stuff like that. They're selling hippie wigs and woofs, man. They're selling hippie wigs and woofs, man. It's like, you know, it's the end of an era, right? Sorry, I haven't warmed up. That was a terrible Danny. I'll get better as we go along. So, if I medicined you, you'd think a brain tumor was a fucking birthday present.
Well, what is that particular accent?
I don't know what it is. It's funny. I remember Bruce Robinson talks about it in one of the commentaries of documentary. It was apparently about some makeup woman he'd met somewhere who was the stupidest sounding woman he'd ever heard in his life, apparently. Who was like, do you understand? Do you understand? So apparently that's the accent he just stole off somewhere. It's fucking brilliant.
Oh, so that's not an actual like regional British, like a certain region?
No, not really. I mean, it's a type more than it is. I have to, when we get to it though, Ralph Brown. I mean, there's so many good performances in this film, but Ralph Brown is he's fucking, to the point where he was asked to reprise it, right? In is it Wayne's World 2 he turns up in?
Oh yeah, I think so. Yeah, that's
He
true.
turns up doing the same voice, right?
Right. Del Preston, right?
Yeah, yes. Yeah, so, and I think he's done it in something else as well, but it's, yeah, it has its fandom. Yeah, so we'll get, yeah, I was halfway explaining how the cult is, but we've gone into the plot now, so we'll finish that up. So they decide to try and get out into the country. WITHNAIL goes to Uncle Monty, right, as played by Richard Griffiths, another amazing character, this kind of I guess wealthy, shut-in former kind of I used to tread the boards, right? That's what he says. He's a kind of, and you know, outrageously homosexual, living alone with his cat. Which is just, I love this thing with him and his cat. Like he calls it, what's he call it? A thug at somebody. You thug! I know, who calls a cat a thug? It's just brilliant. Oh, that oaf has ruined my. Sorry, I'm gonna try and stop doing that because this is the most quotable. You don't want to get, because like what happened with Rocky Horror Picture Show, students almost ruined this film in the 90s, right?
Yeah.
People would just get together and quote, and you'd get fucking students going into tea rooms and saying, "Give us cake and the finest wines," and so they almost destroyed the cult, because it is just, you don't want to be stuck in a room with. I have a WITHNAIL fan who lives here, my friend Steve, and yeah, sometimes we get together, and occasionally WITHNAIL comes up, and yeah, it's just we can't help ourselves. It's just such a quotable film. Anyway, so they get the cottage from Uncle Monty, and basically they go out. They will be gone on holiday by mistake, right, and all that. And are you the farmer? Of course, he's the fucking farmer. It's just, yeah, it's very episodic in a way, but it's a character study. The comedy comes out of the character, and this will be interesting when we finally get round and I stop talking, and we'll get to your opinions as well. I'll be really fascinated, because there are very few people I know, even people who love this film, there are very few people I know who loved it straight out the gate. This seems to be something you need to rewatch and rewatch and rewatch. And anyway, we'll get to see if that's. And I certainly was. I think the first I saw this film, I did like it. So I certainly liked it, but I didn't love it immediately the way I do now. But of course, like I said, I've seen it a squillion times, and yeah, and it ends with one of them getting a big break, the other one's left behind, and we'll get to scenes with, because Danny comes back and presuming Ed, and we'll get to all the quotes and stuff like that. But yeah, so it starts off as a flop, and yeah, basically garners a cult really slowly, right? It's a genuine cult film. I guess it must have started on video. Maybe some people saw it, and then it turned up on TV, and it rolled and rolled. And now it is, it's like you said, it's on lists, right? Like people talk about. It's considered, and it's almost. And again, I'll be really fascinated to see what your opinion. It's almost a film, I think, that almost suffers from its reputation, because it's a very low key film. And I think if someone's in your face saying, "You got it, win the lights," hilarious, like, I don't know if that sets you up for what it is, because it's not banger after banger after banger or a big gag. It's a very low key affair. It's shot. It's not shot like a comedy. It's very kind of, dark rooms. It looks realistic, and apparently when Bruce Robinson initially almost walked off the film, because one of the producers was trying to make it all bright, because they said comedy's got to be bright, and they didn't understand what he was doing, right? Basically,
Right.
He was making this very kind of like a drama, really. It just happens to have brilliant comedy, but the comedy is just out of the characters. It's very well observed, and yeah, so I'm not sure if it's a film that benefits from having a monumental reputation. I'm wondering if it's better. It's a film you discover by yourself. But anyway, whatever. It does have this reputation now, and it does have hardcore fans, myself included. And let's see if it has a new fan or not, in the shape of young Ron Scott. Take it away, Ron.
So, yeah, I think you hit most of the beats there about my experience with it, which is, yeah, I mean, I liked it. As I said, the first time you saw it, I liked it, and I can see certain elements why everyone was like it, but I think, yeah, again, probably needs rewatches. I think it suffered from having my expectations a little too high. And also I also don't have the cultural connection to it, which other people do, right? So so I don't know, a lot of it I was kind of I was watching it and I was like, oh, okay, but I was a little curious as to the reputation it had most of the time. I was like, well, that was quite good. Of course, Richard E. Grant is great. The actors are all good. I liked what's his name? Ralph Brown was, yeah, those actors are really good. Home Again was okay. I think it was sort of, didn't require that much, but I didn't really get the whole thing about it, and and so I think, but again, I think that's exactly what you got. Is that I think my expectations were a little bit too high. I didn't know what I was really getting into, and then I think I have to rewatch it at least once or twice more, I think, before I get it. So
yeah. Well, the question is as well, is that something you would be happy to do, or would it be
Yeah,
like,
I would, because I don't think people are wrong about this movie. I don't think it's like something that, there's some movies, which I'm rediscovering these days by showing my kids, where I think nostalgia wins over quality.
yes,
You
agreed.
know what I
Yeah.
mean? There's movies that people, oh, this movie is so great, and you go back and it doesn't really hold up that well. That it's more because you love it because you've experienced the nostalgia with it. But I think this one must be more of a quality over nostalgia.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, but I have to sort through what's nostalgia and what's quality, and also I don't have this nostalgia to go through, so I have to kind of take it on its own merits. And as well, I don't have the not just the nostalgia, but I don't have the cultural connection to it. But I think it probably resonates a lot more with British people in general, I think, too, right? So
Probably.
yeah, because a lot of like even like you said it was so quotable, but some of it is so colloquial that I don't even know what they're saying. So so yeah, so I think I mean I enjoyed it. One thing that stuck out to me though, I don't know if I was going to ask you to comment on it, was did it not seem quite relatively like one kind of thing that I thought the movie in general seemed quite homophobic.
Okay, let's
Yeah.
jump.
Okay, let's jump. Yeah. So as I was saying, I found the movie like subtly very on the line. I thought it felt quite homophobic, and I mean in that Richard Griffith's character is, I guess you said he's quite a like uh an interesting character, a standout character, but he felt quite sort of. I mean, I don't know. Was Richard Griffiths actually gay?
I'm not sure actually.
No, yeah, because it felt a little, I mean, at least from today's standards, a little bit stereotyped, and he's essentially a sexual predator. That's basically the
He
whole.
is. He is. Yeah. Yeah.
And and I know that in 1987, probably it would be hilarious to see this, fat queen, kind of him kind of squirming away from trying to avoid being kind of jumped on by this fat gay man. But in today's, from my point of view, from watching in 2024, it just felt really kind of like it felt tone deaf. I don't know. I mean,
Well,
yeah, you know what I mean? It
that's
felt
interesting.
like I don't know why this is funny. Like I don't know. I can
That's
see
interesting.
why it was funny at some point, but I don't think it's funny
Yeah,
now.
no, I don't think it is. I see what you mean. I see what you mean, and I was wondering that as well. If this was, for instance, a new film, or yeah, if it would read that way. But and I certainly I take on board what you're saying, but I don't think that's the case because for me, it's he is a he is a predator to a certain extent, and he's also a foolish character.
Yes, sure.
Plus he's gay, right? But
Hmm,
I don't think the character is predatory and foolish because he's gay, if you see what I mean.
hmm,
It's just
right.
he is, and he feels very real to me as well.
Hmm,
He feels
okay.
very real to me. And also I think there's a certain amount of sympathy. There's like the reveal when he comes into the bedroom
Hmm,
and he's got his makeup on.
yeah.
That kind of plays, I've always thought that plays as, it's funny, but it's also kind of sad, and
Yes, sure.
it's kind of, there's something a bit tender and touching about it. So I don't think the Richard Griffiths character has ever played like the butt of the joke,
Hmm,
for me at least. And I think fans as well kind of tend to defend, and I think it was I think it's a very authentic character.
mhm.
Plus, as well, I mean, again, I wouldn't want to put words in his mouth, but I would imagine Bruce Robinson was just the such the opposite of a homophobe as you
Hmm,
could possibly. He
right.
strikes
Okay.
me as the kind of man who wouldn't even enter his head to have
Hmm.
prejudice against someone. I mean, I don't
Yeah.
know about, for instance, the WITHNAIL character, but there's
Hmm,
a certain sense that that character could be gay as well, I think, or
yes.
certainly within those circles.
Mm.
You know, I don't think he would have been a stranger to, and it's funny. I can't remember if I mentioned this before. But when I was in sixth form college, I remember in the drama class, I remember the two main guys who were the you know, at that level, at least, you know, they were like the two big hitters of the drama class, the two guys,
Right.
and they're both gay, and one of them was, you know, just a gay guy, you know, and then the other one was kind of like, he was like throwing hissy fits and kind of being very dramatic and and that was his
Yeah, sure. I know that. Yeah,
but
it's a bit like that.
if someone had played him in a
Hmm.
film, someone would have said, "Oh, that's such a terrible stereotype of, you know."
Right.
So I feel that the Uncle Monty character is more authentic than he is problematic, or rather, if he is problematic, that's just because it's not because he's gay, right? It's because
Right.
yeah,
Okay. I just that scene just struck me as being like, you know, I mean, I know I get it. In the 80s, it was hilarious to, you know, have to avoid being hit on by a gay guy. Like I know that that was like a comedic thing,
yes.
you know, because I it's happened in other movies where like,
No, no, no.
no, like, you know, I'm not really
Let me
gay, and they
stop you
think,
there. Let me stop you there because
yeah.
I think you might be confusing two things there, right?
Hmm.
I know what you mean. Yes, there
Hmm.
would have been a whole bunch of comedies of around the same era
Right.
that played with that, "Whoa, here comes the
Yeah.
man" character. But
Sure.
I think this is coming out of a totally different tradition,
Okay.
if you see what I
Okay. I'll buy that. I'm
mean.
just saying because seeing it for the first time, it just made me feel uncomfortable rather than, but I got the impression that it was probably hilarious, or maybe even still is hilarious to certain people who watch this movie, but I didn't find it funny at all. I found it just really kind of uncomfortable to watch, and yes, sad as well, right?
Yeah.
So that's why I was like, maybe I'm not, maybe I'm misunderstanding, or maybe it's the cultural thing, the timing thing, or maybe I just need to watch it again, or you know, so I
Yeah.
think that's
As
this
far
is
as I
where I was
know,
going.
this film has always played relatively well with the LGBTQ
Yeah,
community.
because I was trying to look it up before I came on today to see like, has there ever been any kind of comment?
Sorry, that's not me talking over you. That's the last recording suddenly started playing after it converted.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I was trying to see if there's any kind of backlash or any comment in terms of this movie compared to the LGBT community, but I couldn't find anything. But so it could just be me. So I just kind of struck me as being a little bit kind of, yeah, of its time kind of thing. So I wasn't sure if maybe it was not playing as well nowadays as it did then. And if people, so again, I wasn't sure if it was me or culture or time or, you know, yeah, whatever. So
I think it's the kind of thing, like if you tried to do it now, I think in an ideal world, I think you probably you should still be able to do this kind of thing now because I think it's coming from a good place. But
right.
yes, I think someone would pounce on it now and it would become the kind of collateral damage to changing mores, which is
Right.
which
Sure.
is you know, unfortunate. However, on the other hand, it's like, well, the fight and the moving on is unfortunately sometimes a bit more important than the individual things that might be targeted for the wrong, you know, some things are targeted as being sexist or homophobic or whatever because they look like things that are but aren't. You see what I mean? So
Right.
so you know, I would I certainly I could see why people would have a problem with it, but I yeah, I it doesn't read like that to me. I think it's on it's on the side of the angels, I think, other than the other side, I think. But yeah, no, it's interesting. I would wonder actually how it would play maybe to like younger than us, like to say someone in their 20s or something like that watched it. I wonder if it would play as being in some way mean-spirited or, as you said, tone deaf or
Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, I mean, again, I'm not the, you know, spokesperson for the LGBT community, you know, so, but I wondered if it felt a little of its time rather than, or if it was just me, or if I just wasn't getting it. You know what I mean? Which is entirely possible because I often don't get it. So, but and I did think that it was sort of heavily implied that WITHNAIL was gay. Not
Right.
just, yeah, I thought it
Okay.
was, because I thought the point was that he had passed it on to the Paul McGann character, that it was telling about him being in the closet, because he was projecting and sort of deflecting from it being about him. And
Right.
then that kind of very final parting, right before he takes off, it goes for the train, and then he does the Hamlet speech. It was quite kind of charged, I thought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a powerful scene anyway. So, especially watching it this time, I was quite surprised how moving I found that last scene. It's actually
Yeah.
kind of quite upsetting that he is kind of being left behind, because prior to that as well, there's like once Paul McGann's character has found out that he's already moving, because you can feel it earlier. There's like scenes where he wakes up before WITHNAIL and goes out and looks at the countryside, and it's just like, wow, this place is beautiful. And
Yeah.
he's like reacting to things. He's not. He's clearly has eyes open for something a little bit wider. Whereas towards the end of the film, Danny and I and presuming Ed are in the room, and they're all kind of getting stoned with the Camberwell carrot, and they feel as if they're not really going to move on. And Paul McGann's already got one foot at the door.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean,
yeah. No,
yeah,
I would
thought,
definitely advise. Well, it's interesting as well, because the other thing as well, it's not so much nostalgia, but I think it's like you were saying, this film would benefit from, and certainly would, and I can easily see you becoming a fan of this film that would quote.
yeah, I got,
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, the thing is, you're a man in his 40s with job and a family and a whole roster of things you want to watch, and so where would you find the time? And I think that's the thing, is it's not so much nostalgia, but if you encounter this when you're younger, like when you're a student or something, and you have no money and all the time in the world, and should we just get stoned and watch WITHNAIL and I again? And that's how these things are, like that's certainly how again, now if this is a brand new release, I saw it, would I have the time to watch it and again and again and again for it to become, so there's that element as well, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, especially like when I was in the 80s, when I was a kid, you'd watch the same 10 movies over and over again, because you only had like 3 videotapes with, and there was like 3 movies on each tape, and you just watch the same movies over and over again.
Right.
And those become like just part of your fabric of your being, right? Because not necessarily because they were particularly good, but those were because that's all you did, right? That's all you could do. But now with like, literally 1,000,001 things to watch, and at any time, it's hard to kind of get to that point of loving something to the point where it becomes part of you, because you just move on to the next thing, right? There's no time to rewatch stuff, or there's too much stuff to do. So
but I think if ever a film was deserving of the investment of time, it would be.
Yeah, I definitely could see why it got a reputation, and definitely certainly the standouts I think were Richard E. Grant, which I love Richard E. Grant. I think he's a great actor, and knowing that this is his first one was quite amazing, because he's quite full on this one, right? So it's a great character.
He does a funny thing in this I'd never noticed before. There's a scene, and I reckon it's deliberate. There's a scene, when he's caught taking the piss test, and he's got the kid's urine. The cop, and he kind of falls against the wall, and he looks.
Sure.
I'm sure he's doing Stan Laurel. He's doing a Stan Laurel face.
Oh yeah, you think
I
so?
thought so. I think he was a direct Stan Laurel ref. He looked just like.
Yeah.
But there's lots of things, like I said, I've seen this a million times, but there's still things that pop. Like this time I noticed the reference, to the Zeffirelli. It might be the Zeffirelli reference where Richard E. Grant, he looks at the paper, and some young star's got a job, and he does it, and a tenner for his ass and all that. And you thought, oh, okay, I see where that's coming from. Now I probably wouldn't have got that the first couple of times.
Sure, yeah.
I saw it. So it still has little treasures, things that I noticed.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't mean to step on it if I know it's like a beloved film, and I don't want to be like, oh, this is it wasn't, again, it wasn't terrible, but I think I didn't have the background or to connect to it as much. And maybe it will, as you said, maybe I'll become a big fan if I watch it, 8 or 10 more times. But if I have time,
it might only take one
or
stream,
2 or 3.
because I
Oh,
think
okay.
because I think it's, on the one hand, it's not just it's not just familiarizing yourself with it. I think it's just to take that initial bloom of the rose a little bit, that you don't expect non-stop hilarity next time.
Right. Sure. Yeah.
So it might only just, because I think
Take one more. Yeah.
I think it was the second time I saw it, I thought, hang on, this is something special. It just needed that first kind of, yeah, it's not that, it's this, or
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
And had it been set up? I mean, when did you first see it? In '87 or?
No, I would have seen it at some point. I think when the cult was slowly growing in the mid-90s, when I was like 14, 15, it turned up on television, and
Oh, okay.
yeah. And then I think I taped it off television, and then yeah, it's all right. And then I had it lying around, and like you said, watched it again. And then I was like, hang on, and then I take it, to other, because that's the thing, is watching it with other people as well, right?
Right. Yeah.
The first
Yeah.
time,
Also, I find, a lot of movies that are beloved also had a social element of it when you first saw it. Like one of the first, like, here's a great example. I mean, for example, you and I know you're probably quite, I don't know what your feelings of this movie are, but movie Napoleon Dynamite,
okay, yeah.
right? I know a lot of people kind of like, man, Napoleon Dynamite, and it had a bit of a cult following, whatever.
Yeah.
But the very first time I ever saw this movie was like at a party with like 20 people. We were all watching it together, and the atmosphere of watching that movie kind of becomes part of the fabric of the movie for you, right? And so even if you see it again by yourself, you're remembering how you felt the first time you saw it, which is part of this group of people. Or even that's the idea of seeing it in a theater, seeing something in a theater with a group of people, right? I mean, this having the social element of seeing a movie versus seeing it for the first time by yourself also changes how you experience it, I think. So
Oh yeah,
so
absolutely.
so I think
Speaking to it did have a, I think it still does. I did a music video job not that long ago, and the leader of the band, the female lead singer who was the main guitarist, was wearing a Vote for Pedro t-shirt.
Oh, really? Okay.
So there you go. The cult lives in Japan, at least. So there we go. I think that was a pretty interesting double, actually. Plenty to talk about.
Yeah. And Paul McGann was Doctor Who too, right?
Yeah, for like one TV movie. It was in that period before the initial run of Doctor Who ended. Sorry, after the initial run ended with Sylvester McCoy, and before Christopher Eccleston took over and became popular again. Although it only really became popular when what's his face was after Chris. Who was after Chris Eccleston? The big one, the one with
David Tennant.
Yeah. So David Tennant, that's when it really took off. But in between, there was a TV movie in like '95 or something. Paul McGann was a doctor who was actually, I would think, could be a pretty good doctor if he had a chance. And Eric Roberts was the master.
Oh, really? Eric Roberts, really? Okay. But like, if you look at Paul McGann's like his filmography, like the top, like there's like at least 25 things here about Doctor Who. So he's done it more than just that one movie. So he's
well, maybe audio books and things like that.
He's in like podcast series and but there's other things, like he was like not just podcast, but like there's a TV series called the Eighth Doctor Adventures. Anyway, saying that. So anyway, it looks like he was able to do more. So.
Yeah, well, that's the thing that I think. Nowadays you can make a whole career on having been in Doctor Who for an episode or something.
Sure. Yeah. They've just started a new one, right? The 14th Doctor.
Okay, the cult is now international, right? For decades and decades and decades, you talk to anyone outside the UK, and they, what Doctor Who? They would literally ask, right?
Who?
And now, now everyone knows, right? The cat's
Yeah.
fag.
Well, they just started the brand new Doctor, right? Just
Okay.
yesterday, I think the new one started.
Already?
Yeah.
I haven't watched
Is our the first Black Doctor, I think.
okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Nakudi something. His name that. Yeah.
So until next time, where we will be responding to With Nail and I. And
Is it with nail or with null?
take your pick.
Because they pronounce it in the movie with null. I always thought, looking at the title, it was with nail, but in the movie they say with null.